Hello, Mia. How are you?
Dick, how are you?
I'm really excited to have you on and to have a chat about all things periods and menstrual cycles. So, for those who don't know, you are Mia Klitzis, the founder of Moxie, which is one of the, I think, most visually alluring brands out there. You do such a good job in your branding and your marketing, and you must have such fun with it.
We do have fun. Thank you. That's such a wonderful compliment coming from another woman. I appreciate that so much. But yeah, we do have fun.
Yeah.
Definitely. Fun is one of our brand values actually. So it's kind of inherent in everything we do, down to the packaging. So it is nice to hear that sort of trickles down because it's I think it's an important element, especially in a space like this, which can be quite, oh my gosh, there are so many ways to describe this space. I think we've all got different feels about it, but fun isn't typically a word that we would use to describe periods, right? So
No.
yeah, I think our aim is to make it a little fun because it can be
Well,
anything but.
my first word to you as we kick off is, what is the first word you think of when you hear the word period?
Oh, well, for me, it means so many things because I'm so engrossed in it. But for me, it means, this is going to sound so cheesy, but for me, it means Moxie. But Moxie actually means to have spunk, determination, courage in the face of adversity. And when
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's why we chose the name. And so for me, I think periods themselves have come such a long way, even from when I started the brand nearly 19 years ago now. The space has really changed. And so I think even the way that society perceives periods has shifted. And so for me, I think having Moxie is so inherent, not only in obviously the brand, but I think what it means to be a woman. So,
and can I ask,
I can't help but it's in the DNA.
How did you what drove you to start Moxie and to, create your own range of pads and tampons and now period cups and just period wear in general? How did it come about?
I was very young, very naive. Oh gosh, very green. Really, it started with the idea to put tampons in tins so that they wouldn't roll around in my handbag. So it was sort of like a personal, functional pain point of, gee, this is annoying. And then the more friends I told, they were like, yeah, that is annoying. And then I realized that so many people were having a similar problem, but no one was talking about it. And I just sort of thought, how has no one really addressed this issue that so many women are experiencing? And of course, then going back, oh my gosh, almost 20 years now, periods were a lot more taboo. They still are taboo in a lot of ways, but then even more so. And so I just thought this space really needs some attention. It was arguably the most sort of feminine female category, but what was out at the time felt anything but. And so I thought there's an opportunity to create something that's functionally, I guess, better than what's out there or what was out there at the time, but something that also really kind of spoke to us from an aesthetic perspective, something that looked as nice and as cute and as fun as the other products that we like to buy, like cosmetics and beauty products and other things like that. I thought, why is this space kind of feeling so neglected? Why is it something we have to hide? Not saying that we want to shout about it from the rooftops, but there has to be a happy medium. And so, as a 21, 22-year-old, I just thought, oh, give it a go, as you do at that age. No responsibilities, no sense of what it meant to, leave my internship job and start a business. I was still at uni, actually.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, I don't have a lot to lose. I'll just give it a go and work up the idea and see what happens. And next thing I knew, we're on the shelves at Woolworths. I mean, I say that as if it's frivolous, but I think that's how it felt at the time. It was just like, oh, yeah, whatever.
If we go back to basics and think about the female menstrual cycle and the period, can you break it down for us, for those of us who just need a refresher? Because it's so we get a period every month. I think that in my, like, it becomes quite, I don't really think of it beyond that, apart from when I notice my mood shift.
Yeah.
And it's actually since having kids and my period returning that I actually give it the attention that it deserves, because it's a lot a woman goes through every
So much.
month.
Oh my gosh. I mean, first up, our bodies are phenomenal. Like, once you really look into it and sort of start to understand it a bit more, and I love what you just said then about giving it the attention it deserves. Because even just acknowledging the fact that, because I know, like, and me too, don't get me wrong, don't think just because I run a period company that I'm like, rah periods, yay. I still resent my period so many times, but I also do appreciate it, because it tells me that my body's doing what it should be doing and what it needs to be doing, and that it's functioning properly. I guess if you know what to look for throughout your cycle, your body does give you signs that things are working and functioning as they should. And when things aren't, it will also give you signs. And so we know what to look for. We know when to get checked and when to see a doctor. So it is a pretty magical process. But essentially the bleeding part, or the menstruation itself, is just one phase. So the menstrual cycle itself is broken up into 4 phases. And I guess I won't give you like the full rundown. There is a great blog piece about this on our website that breaks down the stages. I think it's called like Stages of the Menstrual Cycle, and it explains it all in like layman's terms, easy to understand, because it can be a bit complicated. But basically the first stage is menstruation, and that's the bleeding phase. So that's the uterine lining is shedding, and the blood obviously exits through the vagina. Second phase is the follicular phase. Third phase is ovulation. You can tell you're ovulating. You actually might be feeling a little bit hornier during that phase, because that's typically when we're actually most fertile in our cycle, and our discharge is a bit like egg whites. So it's generally about day 14, like bang on mid-cycle. So that's when the egg is released from the ovary. So only one ovary releases an egg. So only one egg matures every month and gets released from one ovary. Some women might actually you might feel a cramp on one side, and it might just be like a little pang, and you'll be like, oh, that felt like a deep period pain, but like just for a moment. Some people say that they can feel like that egg drop, basically.
Wow.
That's ovulation right there. It's quite a short window of time. It's like 24, 48 hours type thing. So that's the ovulatory phase. After that is the luteal phase. And you will notice mood changes. There's so many hormonal shifts throughout this whole thing. And then back to your menstrual phase. So basically throughout this whole process, what is happening is your body is preparing for a potential pregnancy. So every month our bodies are going, oh my gosh, there might be a baby on the way. We need to get prepped. So the lining of your uterus is thickening up in preparation to hold a fertilized egg, which becomes an embryo that's going to attach itself to the walls of your uterus. So that's why that lining is thickening up. So if that doesn't happen, if pregnancy doesn't occur, that lining essentially sheds away, and that whole cycle starts again. So that's basically what it is, and that just keeps happening on repeat. Kind of crazy.
So you're right, the body is so amazing, and I feel like you only really give it the time when, like, for those who suffer things like endo, or those are trying to fall pregnant, or those who are not falling pregnant and really investigating their cycle. It is quite phenomenal when you look at the female in comparison to the male. That the female, I mean, we're not put on earth to have babies. However, the body, our body is built in such a way that it is constantly telling us this is the right time to have babies, this is not the right time to have babies. If anyone listening who is having a hard time on their fertility journey, or has had a miscarriage, you can totally understand how frustrating it must be to not have full control over that cycle, and to look at your body like it's broken, it's not doing the right thing. which is
Mm.
completely incorrect. Like, you know, it's
Absolutely. Yeah.
but
And that's a really
my
good
heart goes
point.
out to those
Yeah.
women because you do feel this sense of, well, my body is built to do this. Why
Mm.
isn't it doing it?
You know, and what I explained then is just like the tip of the iceberg of what goes on.
Yeah.
Like it really is, like, the menstrual cycle is such a complex series of things that happen between the brain, hormones, your uterus, your ovaries. Like, there are so many complex interactions in the body that, you know, even the teeny tiniest thing that's, you know, not happening as it should could throw things off. And so, you know, absolutely, it's by no means like a perfect storm every time. It's, you know, and
It's
it
never
is
quite like
no,
clockwork.
and no, and you know, I really do believe what they say that, you know, pregnancy and having children literally is a miracle, because there are so many things that need to happen,
Yes.
like just like clockwork kind of thing. It really is miraculous. Like, when you look at all those processes.
So what do you, in your experience in the world of, you know, periods, what
Mm.
would you feel is a common misconception amongst other women?
That you can't get pregnant at any time in your cycle. You actually can.
Really?
So a lot of people think that you can't fall pregnant during the menstrual phase. So whilst the likelihood isn't as likely as, say, during your ovulation phase, you can still fall pregnant even when you have your period. So
I remember when we were thinking about having babies, and you get quite fixated on that ovulation, the idea of that 48-hour window of ovulating. But then so many people say, just relax and just have sex. You never know what's going to happen. The added
It's
stress
true.
about getting that timing right.
I was going to say, the other thing that people sometimes forget, or a lot of people don't realize, is that sperm can live inside you for 5 days, up to 5 days. And so suddenly that ovulation window, like, is kind of like, even though you're only ovulating for a certain amount of time, you know, if you know, have, you know, done the act within that sort of, within a certain time frame, like, it can still happen. So yeah.
Gosh, well, moving on to the range and everything you do create. So period cups, can you talk about the evolution of period cups, who could be using them, who potentially isn't, who might not find as much value as others? But yes, talk to me about a period cup.
Period cups, oh, they're an interesting one. We get lots and lots of questions about cups. So look, they're not going to be for everyone. And look, I say that about all types of period care. It's not all a one size fits all. It's, you know, as we know, most of us have got or have had periods at some point. It's about finding what works for you. So I tend to recommend cups for those who are more experienced period havers, so to speak. So perhaps not for a first timer, basically, because they can take some getting used to. Once you do get used to them, in my opinion, I mean, I think they're a bit of a game changer. What's great about a cup is that it's reusable, it's very sustainable, it will last you a long time. So in terms of sort of the reusable options, even over period underwear, I think, which a lot only last for a certain number of washes, cups can last 5 to 10 years if they're properly cared for.
Wow.
So ours, for example, are made out of a medical grade silicone. I always recommend people rinse them in cold water after use, and then in hot water, and then sterilize, because cold water, just much like, you know, washing your clothes, cold water, washing cold first will get stains out. It's the same as a silicone.
Wow.
But a cup, you know, I think if you've got an IUD, if you've given birth vaginally recently, if you've had any sort of surgeries, any sort of, you know, uterine issues, or you've got any conditions like that, check in with a doctor first and just make sure that they're comfortable with you using an insertable like a cup. But otherwise, I'd say go for it. It can be a little tricky to find your fit. Unlike tampons, cups, they do come in different sizes. So the size is driven by the absorbency of the tampon, whereas a cup unlike a tampon, collects flow. So it literally is like a little cup for those that aren't familiar with a period cup. It's like a little silicone device. You fold it up and you insert it into the vagina and it pops open. And then it literally sits inside you with suction. So it doesn't suction against your cervix. Any holes in the top of it that just create like a suction seal. And then you simply just pinch the base to release that seal and wriggle it out. Again, it can take a teeny bit of getting used to, but once you've figured it out and you've found your fold and your flow with it, it's really quite simple.
So the period cups, did you say they come in
Yes.
different sizes based on
Cups
your flow?
No, it's not so much about the flow. It's more about the length of your cervix. So during our period, our cervix actually drops a little bit. So if you were to insert a clean finger, and I actually suggest that people do this. I'm a big advocate for familiarizing yourself with your body. And you'd be surprised how many people say, "Ew, that's gross. I'm not putting a finger up there."
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. But, I think these things are important. And again, we really do advocate it. It's important to understand your body. If you were to insert a clean finger, you could feel the tip of your cervix. A lot of people describe it like the tip of your nose.
Yeah.
And you can feel the tip of it. And so you can generally tell sort of what the length of your cervix is, or you could ask your gyno at your next cervical screening whether you have a low or a high cervix. Some people's naturally sit a little lower in the vaginal canal. Some people's sit a little higher. But again, it's not super scientific, but if you were to insert a finger, you can sort of judge where up to sort of what knuckle you can feel your cervix at. And that will sort of tell you whether you have a low or a high sitting cervix. If you're sort of at, the first knuckle or so, you've got quite a low cervix. If it's second knuckle or longer, then it's a higher sitting cervix. But again, remember that your cervix will drop during your period. So when you're shopping for a menstrual cup, some do come sized. Ours are just quite a regular size, I would say, like a normal, and I'm using inverted commas for those that are listening, not watching. But you can get shorter cups for those who do have a lower sitting cervix, and it will say that on the pack. So if you are shopping for a cup, just be conscious of that. Shop around, look for the sizing, or ask if you're not sure.
In comparison to a tampon, if you were to change your cup every, let's say, 4 to 6 hours or 3 to 5 hours or whatever it is, are you rinsing and using a new cup, or are you
same cup,
but are you rinsing in between?
Yeah, exactly right. So you basically you tip it out. So for those watching, this is a period cup. Those that are listening can't see it. It literally just looks like a mini little teardrop shaped cup. But basically, you insert, you remove, you tip it out in the toilet or in a sink or whatever else. As I said earlier, rinse it in cold water so that it doesn't stain the silicone. Rinse it in cold, then you can rinse it in warm water. Some unscented soap if you wanted to, but water is fine in between. In between cycles, you would then sterilize it, and before use, you sterilize it. But just during cycle, just empty it and rinse it, and then reinsert it.
Okay, so you're only sterilizing once your period is over, and you're waiting for your next period for the next month.
Yep, that's right. It's literally empty, rinse, repeat, basically. It's quite simple, whereas with a tampon, it's a single use. You're removing it, disposing of it, having to insert a new tampon. Cups still do carry similar risks associated with tampons, like toxic shock syndrome, which people don't realize. But so do pads. Toxic shock syndrome is more so linked to tampon use and has been linked more so to tampon use. But, men and children can still get toxic shock. It's caused by bacteria. So you still have to rinse and remove your cup at least every 8 hours, just like a tampon. It doesn't mean you can leave it in longer just because it collects flow and doesn't absorb it. You still need to remove it and rinse it at least, I would say, every 4 to 6 hours. But it will hold quite a bit.
Would you say a period cup could be better for those with a heavier flow?
Yeah, because it can hold quite a bit. So our regular cup holds 30 mils, whereas a regular tampon, I think, holds like 11.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so realistically, you're not going to bleed that much.
Yeah.
You don't. We don't. That's another misconception. We do not bleed as much as we think, but they do hold quite a bit, yes. So often, yeah, we do actually get a lot of people that have given birth vaginally going for period cups. Find that a lot of mums do feel that their flow is a little heavier after they've given birth. And so they may opt for even a super cup, which is actually, well, ours anyway, I can only speak for ours. Ours are the same length. Our regular and our super cup are the same length, but our super cup is a little wider in diameter. And so those who have given birth vaginally just like that feeling of the vaginal canal feeling like it's, I guess the space is taken up a little bit more by the cup. Whereas with tampons you do get leakage because they don't absorb like immediately as soon as the flow hits. So if that tampon isn't like perfectly positioned, you're going to get like a sneaky leak. It just happens. Like it really does. It's a lot more common with tampons.
Has it not been inserted correctly, or is it not sitting correctly, or both?
So there could be so many. There's a few variables, and it can be really hard to tell, to be honest. It could be the way it's positioned. It could be that the size isn't correct. It could be the wrong size, the wrong absorbency for your flow. It could be that it's been left in too long or not left in long enough. But again, don't leave it in for longer than 8 hours, irrespective of whether it has soaked through or not. So there are a few variables with tampons. So you should always wear the lowest possible absorbency to suit your flow. Really, it's a recommendation that's set out by like all the health authorities pretty much globally. And it's essentially to help reduce your risk of things like toxic shock syndrome. So it helps to prevent overabsorption, essentially. So always go as low absorbency as you can. So people often think, oh, I want to prevent leakage, and so I'll go with a super tampon. That's not the right thing to do. If you only have a light flow, you should be wearing a light or a mini tampon, basically.
Wow, I absolutely thought the form.
Fibers will just like stick to you internally, and you may find that, fibers can be left inside you and stuff like that. So you want that tampon to absorb everything it can, and that can really, the best chance of that happening is if it's best suited to the flow that's going on in there.
That's a good point. I think sometimes removing a tampon how comfortable it is will tell you if you're using the right size or not. Because if it's difficult, I'm assuming it's not the right size.
Yeah. You either haven't left it in long enough, as I said, which means it can be left in a bit longer, but no longer than 8 hours, or you need to size down.
So on the topic of educating, your TikTok, the Moxie TikTok, is just surging at the moment. And you said you're getting a lot of teenagers coming because they are wanting to learn about body changes, hormones, vaginal discharge, their periods, the different, pads, tampons, period cups. When it comes to mums of daughters who, and am I right in saying women or girls are getting their periods earlier now, or they can get their periods from 8 years old, or 8, 9, 10, 11?
Yeah, so a lot of research does suggest that the age is, or puberty is starting younger than previous generations. So periods can start from 8 years old, and we are seeing girls get their first period at 8 years old. So anywhere at the moment, the age range that's considered normal is between 8 to 16.
Wow.
And 8 is quite young to get your first period. It's daunting. I mean, even as an adult, it's a lot dealing with a period some days.
Yeah, the days of being in high school or junior school and having a period and having to jump in the swimming pool or do some co-ed activity with the boys and worry about leaking on your uniform. It's a lot for a young person to take on.
And they still all have those fears.
Oh, yeah. They never go away. You never want to leak.
No, it's the biggest thing we hear on TikTok is like, they're terrified of leaking, that they're terrified of pads showing through their clothes. They're terrified of telling someone. They're even scared to tell their parents. So we see a
Mm.
lot of kids saying, I got my period, I haven't told anyone yet, or I just got my first period, I don't know what to do. There's such a lack of awareness around what's going on. And I guess because it's really not being taught. I mean, Australia does not have a formal menstrual education program or a formalized sex ed program in schools.
Mm.
And so they're definitely not sort of getting taught even just the basics at school. And if it's not happening at home either, they have no idea what's going on. I guess, almost 1 million of them are turning to TikTok. So
It is
yeah,
wild.
our account has grown rapidly. Literally in 12 months, we've amassed nearly 1 million followers totally organically. Like, we have not done any sort of paid ads or anything like that. We literally just provide free education on the platform, and we talk about all things periods and intimate health. And it's not safe for work if you're watching. Like, you may not want to bring the account up on your computer if you're at work. we use anatomical models, and it is about calling things what they are. We explain things in really simple terms that a young person can understand. It is a 13 plus app, so it is aimed at 13 plus, but it is really about just ensuring that people have got free access to the basics and that basic info of what to expect from bodily changes, right through to postpartum, basically.
The bodily changes is it's just a lot to change so much in quite a short period of time. And with that, you've got emotions and hormones. And the hardest thing, I think, is girls and peer groups and friendship circles, they develop at a very different, rate when they're that age. So it's not like you might not have your best friend, or you might be the first by 2 years or the last by 3 years. I mean, even that can bring a lot of anxiety, maybe a bit of embarrassment. I'd hate to think, but probably shame.
Yeah.
There's a lot there at that age, regardless if you're 8 or 13. That it's that transition of girl to woman, as they say. It's a big deal. And it's so obvious as well. It's not something you can really hide, because, when you are at the pool and there are girls and boys around, and there's the girls with the bigger boobs and then the more flat-chested girls who haven't yet gone through puberty, it's a very public display of where you're potentially at. And for those who are a bit shy or don't want the world to know, it's really hard to hide that. Not that you should hide it, but if you're feeling uncomfortable about it, it's so brutal. It's so brutal.
For sure.
For mums listening who haven't yet or hadn't thought about having that kind of chat with their daughter, what are some tips you have around, setting up because it can be a little bit, you might get a bit of pushback from your daughter who might feel embarrassed. But what would you say? Go out for a girls' day, or just sit on the couch, or have how should mums, or what is a nice way for them to approach the subject?
It's interesting because we get the same question from the tweens or from the kids. So they'll often say, this is happening and I want to tell someone, but I don't know how. So they're just as terrified. So you're both probably equally as terrified as each other. I would say, any sort, your child best, obviously. So any sort of, disarming sort of situation where they don't feel trapped. So I sort of tend to say that perhaps it may not be like in the car ride on the way to school, because they might feel a little, trapped, like they can't go anywhere, they can't escape. But it might be in an environment where they do feel comfortable and where you are both comfortable. But it may not necessarily be as formal as, okay, let's sit down and have this big, long, intense talk, because it is a lot and it is a lot to cover. And also, let's not forget that these things do happen over the course of quite a few years. Puberty does go for quite a few years. So again, based on like what we're seeing and what we see on TikTok and what what we hear from these young people is, it really does start with discharge. They get discharged and they think they've got their period. They ask, can your period be clear? So they think they've got their period. So the initial convo may be, hey, sweetie, you might start to notice this. And you'll probably know when it's happening. If you're doing the washing at home, you're probably noticing this because you're probably noticing this in their underwear. You'll know whether it's 8 or 9 or 10 because you'll know when they're starting to have these changes. And so that may be the start of the convo. And that's just opening the door to you having that convo with them. And then, you know, that alerts them to the fact that there is that open door for them to then come to you when things start to change for them. So it may be as simple as, hey, sweetie, you might start to notice this. That's totally normal. Don't worry. Mum has that too. All girls have that. That's just your vagina's way of cleaning itself. It's totally normal. Don't worry about it too much. It's totally fine. It just means your body's changing and you're growing up. It's normal. You might start to notice other body changes too. It's fine. Mum went through it too. And all your friends are doing it too. All your friends, it's going to happen. It's going to happen a little differently for everyone. And it can be really casual. And again, you know your child, you know where they're at developmentally. But it can be that simple, and it can be a progressive conversation. It doesn't have to be like a, you know, bang, let's talk it all out now and let's have this, you know, big chat now. It may just be the start of something, because that really we find is the biggest one is discharge, and they freak out. They don't know what's going on, and honestly, they're petrified. They're so terrified, and it's like, oh my gosh, no one's told you about discharge. You will have this your whole life, unless it smells bad or it's a funky color like green or gray or bright yellow. Everything's fine.
Back to like my experience of how my mum did it. But I think what happened was I started to notice things in the Coles bag, and then they would come from the Coles bag into my bathroom. So like deodorant, like pads, and over time, I think it started with deodorant, and that made me question, like, why do I need deodorant? Or like, why is there a pad in my bathroom? I don't have my period. Or getting comfortable around those new additions to the bathroom.
But I think, you know, bringing them into the conversation is important, and it might even be a case of like, let's go out together and choose some things and let's talk about the different things. And it may even be a trip to the supermarket or the chemist or wherever, and sort of explaining, you know, this is what this does and this is what this does. Why don't you choose one that you like? And even just being prepared, like, I know you don't have your period yet, but it might come in 6 months, it might come in a year. Don't worry about it yet, but let's just get prepared. Which one do you like? Which one do you like the look of?
I think Moxie is so brilliant in the marketing, in the way it looks, despite the product and how great the product is, because it really does create that like icebreaker. You know, it's fun, like make it fun and go out and find the patterns you think is cute, or the packaging, or, you know, whatever else. It kind of draws you to that, because it's very daunting. Even I remember probably only 5 or so years ago, I would still feel a little bit shy about going to that particular aisle in Coles or Woolies if there was like a male in the aisle as well. And, you know, it seems ridiculous now, but it's very daunting because it's a very public demonstration of, oh, I've got my period at the moment, I'm bleeding. You know, and, you know, there are certain days when you don't want that kind of public, or not that anyone's really looking at you, but you feel it.
It's true. You know, part of it, as I said, like part of the reason why I started it was because I kind of, you know, for myself, I wanted something that felt like it was part of my identity. Like it is such a big part of who we are. It's something that we deal with every month. And so I wanted something that just felt like it was part of my life, not something that I felt like I had to hide all the time, and that was just going to be buried in the bottom drawer, and that I was ashamed of it. It's like, well, it just is. Like, it goes in the shopping cart and it just is. I'm not burying it at the bottom because I'm like, I don't want anyone to see that. Of course I have a period. Like, everyone knows that most women will have a period. It's not a secret. Like, why is it such a shame that, gee, I'm probably bleeding right now or next week and I'm buying tampons because of it? Like, what? So I'm just like, why is there so much shame around this? You know? And so I just think if we can't talk about it, how do we expect, you know, our daughters and young people to come to us openly and want to talk about these things? So I think we sort of we all have a bit of a sense of responsibility to open up this dialogue and these conversations and create that safe space.
Everything to do with the vagina comes, even saying the word vagina, it feels like a bit, like it's wrapped in taboo. And, if you ever have to go to the chemist and buy Canesten or Ural, you dread it and we shouldn't dread it because everyone with, every person with a vulva, a vagina will go through those periods of needing products for their hygiene, health. I mean, not really their hygiene, but their health. But it still comes with such an aspect of stigma. It's sad. It shouldn't be like that at all.
It does.
Especially for the teenagers and young women.
It's funny. No, I know. It's funny because even when we started TikTok properly like about a year ago, and earlier on, they would always pull us up on using the word vagina. They would not censor it even. They would we would get strikes on our videos, or they would block them or delete the videos. But now it's actually fine. It's totally fine. So it's interesting that I think even they've sort of changed their stance. So, and we've never not called it what it is. We're like, well, it's anatomical. And I think I think that's actually another thing. I think when you are having these discussions, as a parent, carer, guardian, anyone, I think talking to young people about intimate care, intimate health periods, call things what they are, call body parts what they are. And I think it's really important. I think even for two-way dialogue, I think even for for a young person to be able to then articulate if something is wrong, it's really important that they understand what things are and what things mean.
On the topic of stigma and shameful, the period sex scene in Saltburn has attracted a lot of limelight. And it's so interesting because all of there are some amazing accounts out there and sexologists who are openly talking about it, explaining that, yes, you can have, of course, you can have sex with your period. You can have oral sex on your period. You can still wear a tampon or whatever else during it. That if you are someone who desires to be intimate during that time of the month, it is not shameful. It is totally normal. Yeah. What's your 2 cents on that scene? Do you think it's provocative in a way that it has people alarmed and feeling fearful, or do you think it's good to see that is, look, I wouldn't say it was a romantic scene, but it just did bring to the table sex with a period.
I think I love to see it because it's got us talking about it. And so again, I think anything to do with opening up dialogue around intimate health, and I think particularly women's intimate health, is fantastic because it's so often, shrouded in taboos and secrecy and all this stuff. So I think for that, it was fantastic. Look at us, we're talking about it on a podcast. And as you said, there are so many other people talking about it too, which is so great. It's weird. I don't know whether I'm a bit desensitized, but I didn't find it alarming. I was like, I'm very much go you and you do you. Some people are going to look at that and go, absolutely not. That is not for me. And that is totally fine. So other people are going to say, yeah, as I said earlier, during your period, well, actually, I said that during ovulation, but a lot of people find that during their period as well, they can actually feel quite horny. And some people do say that orgasming can really help with cramps. Not for everyone. I know a lot of people will be listening to this saying, absolutely not. I just want my partner 40 feet away from me when I have my period. Do not touch me. But other people say that it can actually help with period cramps. And we've spoken to doctors who say that is a thing as well. This is not medical advice by any means, but you can still get, bloodborne sort of diseases and things like that from oral sex. So if you're concerned about that, you could use a dental dam or things like that. You could wear a cup or a tampon, do it in the shower, whatever. But, there's, whether you think it's yuck or not or whatever, it's up to the individual. If you're down for it, go for it. But I love the fact that it was just brought into, I want to say, mainstream media, film. I know it was a bit of art housey film, but I loved seeing it, and that it was just so matter of fact, and it was just out there and got people talking about it.
I was looking at Chantel
Yeah.
Otten's account last night, and she was talking about periods that she does a breakdown on positions that can help with mess, because a lot of it is
there you go.
I think.
Yep.
So there's some really good advice there for anyone who does want to learn more.
Yeah, there's ways and there's ways, right?
Yeah.
So just do whatever works for you. It's going to be different for everyone. Just do whatever works for you.
On the flip side, Moxie, you've just released postpartum care wear as well. So what drew you into the world of postpartum?
Well, we're about period peace of mind ultimately, and that has to extend to postpartum, and it was always intended to extend to postpartum care at some point. And so, we'd been looking at postpartum / maternity for a while, but I'm kind of a big believer in that. I don't just want to release a product unless I can improve on what exists. The world has a lot of stuff. There's a lot of great products out there, and I don't just want to fill it with more stuff for the sake of it. And so our postpartum product and our newer product sort of came off the back of, again, another pain point, not my own this time. This was actually the experience of a friend, and she was telling me about her birthing story. I'm the friend that wants to hear everything, so I'm like, tell me everything, gory details and all
the juice.
And I know there's a lot of mums listening, so there's probably a lot of shared experience here. But basically, she was telling me how after her vaginal birth, she was given a postpartum pad, like an absorbent pad that was very, very thick in itself. It was sliced down the center, and it had ice fingers placed inside it to basically help with her swelling. And she had also torn during birth. And she's like, I don't know what hurt more, the tearing or the pad with the ice fingers that they gave me afterwards, because it was too cold. The corners were too sharp. It was so uncomfortable. It was just the worst experience ever. And of course, my brain is just going a million miles an hour, thinking there has to be how in, 2020, I think it was 2022 at the time, I just thought, how are we still, this just what? How is there not a better solution? And it just felt a little bit makeshift. And I just thought there has to be a better way. And so essentially we've developed a beautiful, very thin, yet deceptively absorbent organic pad with a hidden pocket at the back. And each pack comes with a long reusable gel pack that can be warmed or cooled. So you can warm it and wear it during labour to help soften the perineum and that area, predominantly for vaginal births. And then you can cool it and wear it obviously post-birth to help soothe swelling and things like that. Or you could wear it on your breasts to help with, breastfeeding. Or for anything else, it's a gel pack. You can warm it and cool it and use it for whatever you need. But essentially that can just get, reused. It sits between 2 layers of film at the back of the pad, so it never touches any flow. So you can use that throughout, your postpartum bleeding phase. And there was sort of nothing out there like it. So we developed that. It was a crazy process. We had to build machinery to do it because the technology just didn't exist. So it was a bit of a process, but here we are. And it's in Coles and Chem Warehouse, and it's been really great. So I hope it helps a lot of new mums.
I had there's 2.5 years between my boys, and when I had the first, I was literally given high-waisted black thick undies and then really thick pads and those ice packs that you break and they become really cold. So I would just have these undies stuffed.
I think it's those, the ice fingers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And you just stuff it all down there, and it was so makeshift and so not what you want it to be doing.
No.
But then after a while, come baby number 2, your brilliant product came out, and it's just, you've got enough to worry about after having a baby, let alone catering for your swollen, sore vagina, and then working out how much and what you can shove down your undies to help. That's too
exactly
much.
it. And that was the point. It's like you've got enough to do and enough to worry about. And the other thing is like when you're doing that and you're stuffing ice down there or whatever, it's like, how do you walk around? How do you get up? How do you get
Oh,
it? Like,
exactly.
how is all that happening? So this is like, it's just, the pad goes in your undies and off you go. Like it's all contained.
Yeah.
I mean, here's a gel pack again for those who are listening, can't see it, but it's gel, it's malleable. So it literally will
Yeah.
mold to your body. And that's the idea. So again, it's just about making anything to do with intimate care easier for women, because they're just, we just thought there has to be a better way. You've done enough.
The gel aspect is the really helpful part, because ice is hard and rigid. And when you've just had a vaginal birth, the last thing you want is to be sitting or anything hard and rigid to be near such a sore area.
Yeah, especially if you've torn, if you've had any tearing, it's just too tender. So yeah, don't freeze it. Just put it in the fridge half an hour before.
Oh, well, it's been so nice to invite you onto an episode. And I just think periods, menstrual cycles, postpartum care, all of these things can be really tough for women when not spoken about, because we've all got such different cycles, different bodies. As we were talking about, fertility journeys are very different. So I just love talking about.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the support so much. It's it's so wonderful to have these really open conversations. So thank you very, very much for having me on.
Oh, you've been a pleasure, and I can't wait to share this episode.